On this episode of Jags Now, presented by our wonderful friends over at Prize Picks, I'm going to discuss two training camp battles that not only do I think all Jaguars fans need to know, but really familiarize themselves with as we get into that portion of the offseason program where you're going to start to see, some battles for some starting positions, some guys trying to make the 53-man roster. But two positional battles in particular have caught my attention based on some kind of recent reporting. So we're going to be discussing on today's episode. But guys, before we get into it, if you enjoy the content that we're putting out here on the channel and you want more Jaguars content throughout the entire calendar year, I mean, we don't stop. I know there's some people that are taking lighter loads and maybe not putting out as much content out on their channels as of right now. We don't stop here at Jags Now. Whether it's the offseason, whether it's preseason, whether it's regular season, postseason, whatever part of the NFL calendar, Jags Now has got you coverage about your Jacksonville Jaguars. Hit that subscribe button if you want to join the movement of over 3,000 real ones. All right, so the matchups that I really want to focus in on is none other than the offensive guard kind of position. And I'll be honest and straight up, I think Wyatt, Milum, and Emmanuel Pregnon have the ability to play either guard position at the next level. But in particular, there have been some reporting that Emmanuel Pregnon could look to challenge Ezra Cleveland for the starting left guard spot, and Wyatt Milum could be challenging Patrick Mekari for the starting right guard spot. Now, obviously, those things can change, especially once we get into camp and see where these guys are kind of necessarily lining up. Because when you go through OTAs and mandatory minicamp, you're not necessarily having that battle in the trenches, or at least really like clear and concise, hey, this is what it's looking like in terms of, going full shoulder pad to shoulder pad, right? Because you're saving that for training camp. You don't want to, roost your guys up early on in the offseason. But we are going to be talking about the offensive guard positions for the Jacksonville Jaguars. We'll start at the left guard spot as Travis Holmes via Big Cat Country. He does a really good job covering the Jacksonville Jaguars. He had this to say when it comes to Ezra Cleveland and both Milum and Pregnon. Both picks, Milum and Pregnon, signal organizational belief in the future of the interior offensive line, and both create a cloud of uncertainty over Cleveland's long-term place in Jacksonville. Whether intentional or not, the message the draft capital sends is difficult to ignore. The Jaguars are building towards something at the guard position, and Cleveland may be the bridge rather than the destination. And I thought, when the Jaguars initially acquired Ezra Cleveland from the Minnesota Vikings, it was kind of one of those, okay, they're trying to get some, veteran presence in there that they can trust in the interior, and he's rewarded them. And I think on his current contract, he is at a bargain. I thought at times he was one of your better offensive linemen last year. You see his PFF grades on over 1,000 snaps this past season. I thought he was somebody that you could rely on if you're an offensive line coach for the Jacksonville Jaguars, if you're an offensive play caller like Liam Cohen was. And I think that Cleveland's future in Jacksonville may be bleak, but beyond this upcoming season. However, I don't necessarily see them moving on from him anytime soon. I don't expect him to get traded or anything like that. We could maybe discuss it if things were to change and other reports come out. But I thought Cleveland was a staple in an offensive line that, had its ups and downs last year. But overall, I thought, given what you're paying for him, that you're getting good return on your value, I guess is the right way I was trying to say this. So, but then it turns to the question of, okay, but the Jaguars in consecutive drafts, as Holmes mentioned, they've invested in the interior of the offensive line, most notably with Emmanuel Pregnon, a third-round pick in this past NFL draft. And I thought this guy could have been a borderline first-round talent. You see the PFF grades from his time at Oregon, 88.2 overall, 88 pass blocking, 88.3 run blocking. Didn't allow a sack and had only one penalty last year. And he was somebody that when the Jaguars, we've all heard it, right? Like the consensus going against the consensus by James Gladstone in the front office. Jaguars fans have, pushed back in terms of, hey, it's about the player, not necessarily consensus and all this, that, and the other. And I get that. Emmanuel Pregnon by far has been the most well-received draft pick by outsiders and people in the building. And if you don't take my word for it, here's what Liam Cohen had to say about Emmanuel Pregnon back during rookie minicamp. Large man, some of that you can't coach, right? And when you have big, strong hands and heavy hands as an interior offensive lineman, I think it's super helpful to the cause, especially in pass protection, to be able to snap things off. And then when you are put in some one-on-one positions up front, being able to not just get stalemates, but potentially move that person in the other direction. I still can't believe the Jaguars got him in round 3. To me, he was easily the biggest steal of the Jaguars draft and arguably one of the biggest steals in the entire draft in general. And look, that brings us to the point of Pregnon has all the capabilities to start being a starting offensive guard in the National Football League. Now, do I project him to be a starter year one? Maybe. And Cleveland's not going to be somebody that's just going to roll over and lie down comparatively to, an up-and-coming rookie. But that being said, Emmanuel Pregnon is not just some guy that the Jaguars drafted for depth. Like, he is a guy that can push for a starting offensive guard position, whether that is at left guard or at right guard. But he did play his entire senior season at Oregon at the left guard position. That is a matchup to keep on as training camp rolls along here. Moving on to you guys, and I want to hear y'all's opinion on this. Pick a left guard if you had to at this current moment. Ezra Cleveland, he doesn't have any guarantees beyond this season in terms of a contract for Jacksonville. Do they potentially look to get Emmanuel Pregnon to start? I want you guys to pick a left guard for this upcoming season. Type EG if you think it's going to be Ezra Cleveland. I don't know why I typed EG there, Ethan. Should have been EC. Or type EP if you think it should be Emmanuel Pregnon. Let me know down in the comment section. We'll get into the other offensive guard position and my thoughts on it here in just a moment, but we would not be able to do this show if it wasn't for our wonderful friends over at Prize Picks. Today's show is sponsored by Prize Picks, America's #1 sports picks app. The big soccer tournament is here. Baseball is well underway, and along with a ton of other sports that you can cash in with on Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 sports picks app and is the best place to win cash while watching sports. You can choose from numerous stat projections on Prize Picks, including passing yards, rushing yards, touchdowns, points, rebounds, assists, hits, home runs, strikeouts, and a whole lot more. Prize Picks is available in most states, including California, Texas, and Florida, and the app is really easy to use. Just pick more or less on a few player stats and lock in your lineup. And guys, we're actually going to do something different on today's show because I've got a Prize Picks lineup here that was not created by me. In fact, it was created by one of my fellow Chat Sports employees. Shout out to my guy, Mike. He's always crushing it in the bullpen. He actually hosts our Jets channel. He has this Prize Pick lineup, a 3-pick player lineup to win $162 here. Thibaut Courtois, more on his goalie saves. You got Christian Pulisic, more on his goals. Think he could score for the red, white, and blue. You also get a little max discount on his pass attempted. All he has to do is complete one pass, and you're a third of the way home. So this is a little 3-player lineup. Let me know down in the comment section if you guys would tail this lineup in Prize Picks. And again, make sure you follow me because I might just be doing that in the comment section. New user offer, download the Prize Picks app today with the link in the comments and the description and use code HMA to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code HMA to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it is good to be right. All right, switching gears here to the right guard position. John Shipley, who covers the Jaguars for Sports Illustrated, had this to say when it comes to Patrick Mekari. If I had to guess today who was the starting right guard in Week 1, I would say Patrick Mekari due to his experience. But it does feel like second-year offensive lineman Wyatt Milum, a top 100 pick just a year ago, is in a good place to compete with Mekari for a spot in the starting lineup. And look, for Patrick Mekari, he did not have the year that you would want to after, being signed in the previous free agent cycle for Jacksonville. And 50 is average. And again, PFF grades, we're using them a lot on the show. They don't necessarily mean everything. That being said, when 50 is average and they are kind of at least somewhat of a benchmark, you kind of can tell the difference between average, okay, good, great, bad, really bad, all this other stuff through PFF, at least in my opinion. And Mekari was just okay. Now, he did have $9.2 million, as you can see at the bottom of your screen, of his base salary converted into a signing bonus, so he's not going anywhere. But in terms of him being pushed for his starting offensive guard position, I think that's very much the case when you consider Wyatt Milum, who he had snaps at both left guard and right guard this past season and did well. Granted, it was a limited number of snaps at 96, as you see on your screen, but I was a big fan of Wyatt Milum when he came out of West Virginia. He played left tackle at West Virginia, was always looked at as going to be, at the next level, playing as a guard position, maybe even getting some center snaps if a team really truly believed him. But he last year kind of dealt with some injuries and didn't really necessarily get off to the strongest in terms of training camp and everything. But this year, he feels like a new man. He's quoted saying that this is the strongest I've ever felt, and also he feels a lot healthier going into this offseason compared to last offseason. So just kind of given the overall thought process here, look, Mekari, he has to play well, and he has to show, especially another year in Liam Cohen's offense, that he is ready to take that next step in terms of getting to the offensive line where they need to be, because we'll see kind of where Cole Van Lanen is in terms of his left tackle. I don't expect him to be ready for the start of training camp, but Patrick Mekari and the rest of these guys, especially on the interior, they need to be able to hold up and prove that they're still the guys, because Wyatt Milum and Emmanuel Pregnon, respectfully, they are ready to challenge for the starting offensive guard positions. Would not be shocked if they do so here in 2026. All right, we talked about a left guard. Now, guys, I want you guys to pick a right guard. Type PM if if you got Patrick Mekari, or type WM if you got Wyatt Milum. I think this one's actually closer than the previous one at left guard, but I'm going to probably roll with Patrick Mekari for now, but Wyatt Milum could very well take this position based on early training camp reports. And like I mentioned, Cole Van Lanen is going to be somebody that starts the training camp period as we look at the offensive line depth chart here. Not starting healthy, still recovering from that knee injury suffered at the end of the 2025 NFL season. You got Anton Harrison and Robert Hainsey. I don't think there's really too much competition at right tackle or center, but this offensive line could look very different the way it ended the 2025 NFL season compared to where it starts at the 2026 NFL season, especially if both offensive guard positions change with Pregnon and or Milum. And if I had to guess, I would predict Cleveland and Mekari to start. I know that's the boring answer, but they have the experience. They're paid like they're starters. And I think that unless Pregnon and Milum really kind of force the issue, it's going to be a position where they're going to lean on the experience, especially when you're trying to capitalize off the momentum that you built last season for those guys being the starters. But if Milum Pregnon really do show something, in training camp and in preseason, I wouldn't rule it out. Maybe if they even start the season as starters, or they just eventually work their way up to being starters as the season progresses. So definitely some training camp battles to monitor, at least in my opinion. But I want to hear from you guys down below in the comment section. And again, this is why you subscribe to Jags Now. We're talking all things Jacksonville Jaguars, 365 days a year. We've got you covered. So always hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and let me know some other content ideas that you guys want this time of year. It is a slower part of the NFL offseason. And until next time, guys, peace out.